It started the way quiet revolutions always do, so softly it felt like weather, something that just changed around the edges until the air tasted different. There were late night talks that stretched past midnight and then past reason, jokes that landed in the sweet spot where laughter loosens the ribs and lets the truth slip out. There were small rituals, a text on the commute home, a photo of a crooked sky, a cup of tea set down without asking because the mood already told the story. It was easy, or that's what it looked like from far away. Up close it buzzed. Every glance carried a hum that wasn't there before. It wasn't sudden. It was a series of almosts, almost asking the question hanging between sentences, almost reaching for a hand when the streetlight changed, almost saying, "Stay," when the door was already partly closed. The safest place felt like sitting cross-legged on the floor with a bowl of warm pasta between us and music playing too low, the kind of song that slides into the room and doesn't need to announce itself. The laugh lines deepened. The inside jokes grew so layered that one word could send both into breathless silence, smiling at the same memory. There were small betrayals of what had been, the kind that bloom in quiet places. A gasp of breath held when the phone lit up with that name, an extra heartbeat in the pause before responding, choosing a word with care as if words were fingertips and the screen a pulse. There was the way attention rearranged like furniture moved at night, nothing where it used to be. The mind reached for thoughts and found them draped in a warmth that didn't belong to just friends. The world kept doing what the world does, morning alarms, dishes, deadlines, but everything vibrated with a secret frequency. Sitting beside each other at a crowded table, shoulders not touching, and still feeling pressed together by something invisible and undeniable, watching a movie and forgetting the plot because the awareness of a body only inches away was louder than any soundtrack. Passing a mug and noticing the slow brush of fingertip. So light it could be called an accident, so charged it couldn't be anything but intention. There were tiny moments that rewrote memory in real time. The first time a joke landed and a hand brushed my knee, not lingering, just a question shaped like contact. The first time a hoodie was offered against the cold, the fabric smelling like cedar and rain, the sleeves too long and folded up with careful attention, a tenderness that felt both ordinary and earth-shifting. The first time a voice dropped soft on my name and the room felt smaller, safer, necessary. What do you call the moment before confession when everything is already confessed by the language of breath? The nights grew longer. The city felt like a backdrop that didn't matter. Any place would do as long as those eyes were near. There were pauses in the conversation where the silence wasn't empty. It was full of the same question asked two different ways in two different bodies. The answer lived there already, unspoken but present, beating under the ribs like a second heart. It was easiest to pretend in daylight. Plans, errands, kindnesses exchanged like gifts with no tags. But then the sun would lower and shadows would lengthen, and the pretending would slip. A shoulder would lean nearer on a park bench. An echo of laughter would return softer, more intimate, the way a mirror returns a reflection slightly warmer than the original face. The city lights would come on one by one, as if announcing an opening night, and it felt like we were both backstage, waiting for a cue only we could hear. The fear wasn't of love. The fear was of breaking the perfect thing already here, the scaffolding of years built from trust and uncomplicated belonging. Friendship is a harbor, love is the sea. The harbor knows the boat, knows the knots that hold it fast, the creak of the rope at night. The sea promises everything and asks for everything back, and yet the tide started tugging. Even in stillness, something moved. There was a rainstorm, the kind that sweeps the streets clean and pulls strangers under the same awning. Clothes damp, hair unexpected, skin cooler than usual and lit from within. We talked about nothing for an hour. Weather, a song stuck in a head, a memory about a disastrous cake. Every detail felt bright, ridiculous, endearing. The corner of a mouth quirked, a raindrop clung to the edge of an eyelash, a breath fogged the air between us. When the rain eased, neither of us stepped out first. The space shrank to a small square of concrete, and the distance between us narrowed to 2 heartbeats, then 1. Not yet, that was the vow the air made for us. Not yet. The waiting didn't feel like denial. It felt like the last, careful turn of a key in a lock that had been waiting years to open. Walking home, shoes squeaked on the wet pavement, and the street lamps dressed the puddles in gold. A hand brushed mine again. The city watched and didn't intrude. The word home shifted meaning by a degree. The first time the truth almost came out happened with bare feet on kitchen tile. Late, so late the night had become a kind of honesty in itself. There was a story about fear, about dreams shelved for later, about how later only comes when someone waits with you. Without planning it, arms wrapped around a waist from behind, just to say, I'm here, without letting the words out. The body leaned back into the touch with a sigh that answered a question neither of us had dared to ask. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, everything else held its breath. What grew between us was not a blaze that scorched, it was a low, steady heat that taught the body a new temperature. It made patience feel like a kind of courage. Each day added a page to a book we were writing without ink. Each night underlined it in private. There were hands hovered, voices lowered, a choreography that learned itself. Sit close, pull back, tease, tend, test, trust. The wanting was gentle and relentless. It never argued, never shouted. It simply kept arriving. Doubt did visit. It asked what would happen if the first step led to a fall. It asked who would catch whom and what price the catching would require. But then a small mercy would appear. A text at the exact right minute, a smile across a room full of other faces, a shared look after someone else's comment that meant, we know. Doubt doesn't live long in places built with presence. We kept showing up. That was the quiet miracle of it. The line finally thinned to transparency one evening on a rooftop that smelled like sun, warmed stone and basil in clay pots. Stories flowed, laughter loosened, and then the silence turned holy again. That hum rose, low and certain. The city spread out below, a quilt of lights and windows, lives unfolding in squares. The air between us felt like the smallest room in the world. A hand cupped a jaw. The skin under fingers was warm and alive, and a breath caught, then steadied like a promise learning to speak. The first kiss didn't ask permission from fear. It found its own opening and moved through. Soft, careful, like approaching a wild creature that has learned to trust. The body knew what the mind had tried to negotiate alone. This was the same person, and also entirely new. Familiarity and astonishment braided into something that tasted like relief. Every year of friendship folded itself into that moment, not erased, not overwritten, blessed. After that, the days wore new skin. Coffee tasted brighter. Errands seemed like excuses to be near. The music we loved sounded like it had always been about this. The same old texts turned into tiny sparks. There were still the old rhythms, teasing, helping, making each other ridiculous on purpose. But beneath it all ran a deeper current that pulled us forward, whether we named it or not. The door to the harbor stood open. The tide came in quiet rooms and noisy ones, in mornings that needed gentleness and nights that asked for courage. The friendship kept doing its quiet work, holding us steady while the fire learned its shape. Nothing we were before was lost. Everything we could be next had already started to bloom. The story we'd been telling as friends kept its punchlines, an added ache, added awe, added a strange, fearless tenderness. It began as laughter and late night talks. It became a pulse that both of us could feel with our eyes closed. It turned into a fire that warmed rather than burned, a door that once opened refused to close again. And standing on the threshold, hearts loud and hands sure, there was only one truth left worth saying. You are my beginning and my home. It happened between sentences, the space where a breath is taken and the world forgets to move. Warm light pooled across the room, the kind that makes dust look like quiet constellations, and conversation wandered the way it always did, easy, unhurried, a river that knew its banks. Music murmured somewhere behind us. The evening had that soft blur at the edges that says stay, and then a hand found a forearm, not to ask for anything, not to prove anything, simply to say here. The touch lingered a heartbeat longer than habit. That one small second cracked the surface of everything known. The skin remembered it first. A hush passed through, like a chapel filling with people just before the first note of a hymn. All the rooms of the body turned their heads. That touch wasn't new, not really. Years of closeness had given 1,000 reasons to lean in, to brush past, to share space. But this time the body heard the truth beneath the familiar. Heat moved outward in a clear line, a tide rolling shoreward you can't pretend is anything else. Every nerve rose to meet it. The air thickened. Words, once plentiful, became too heavy to lift. No one moved. That was the miracle. The old map of us street names like friendship, routes like always safe, lay open on the table, and still the compass swung toward a different direction. The eyes followed it, meeting in a way that asked nothing and revealed everything. There was no decision to make. It had already been made in the quiet, inch by inch, over months of shared jokes, uneven Tuesdays, soup spooned into chipped bowls, the ordinary loyalty of showing up. This was just the body catching up to what the heart had already signed. Time did its strange works, load to syrup, then sped like a bird through a gap in a fence. Voices from outside the window rose and fell, someone calling a name, a car door thudding, a dog's impatient bark. Inside, the smallest movements mattered. Fingers eased against skin, as though reading a secret written there. The pulse under that skin answered back, steady, astonished, saying yes, yes, yes. A laugh almost came, the kind born of pure relief, the feeling of finally putting a key into the right lock after trying too many doors. Everything afterward was lit differently. A glass lifted to drink water looked like a ritual. A shoulder leaned toward the other on the couch, and it felt like new gravity had taken hold. Even the room conspired. The couch, a little narrower than memory, the throw blank, it a little softer, the framed photo on the shelf suddenly a witness. The ordinary didn't break, it opened. It let something in that had been waiting outside in all weather, patient and certain. Fear arrived late, dressed in careful questions. What happens to the beautiful thing already built? What if the thread pulled unravels the whole weave? But fear didn't know this fabric. Friendship had been the loom, love the pattern appearing at last. That first touch didn't raise a field, it drew a path through it. And with that path came gentleness, the promise to walk without crushing wildflowers underfoot, to meet surprise with tenderness, to let wonder set the pace. There was more talking, even then, the kind that circles around what it means to be known. Stories traded like smooth stones, the small embarrassments kept for safe people, the dreams no one else had seen in daylight. The hand drifted away, only to return, as if learning the coastline by tide. The body learned its own patience, choosing nearness over hurry, breath over noise. The mind, finally, stopped negotiating and simply watched, amazed by what honesty looked like when it took a shape you could feel. Later, the night grew deeper and the city's pulse softened. Streetlights stitched long lines across the ceiling. The couch became a harbor, and the silence found clean water to float in. When knuckles brushed again, the second touch sparked recognition rather than shock. It was as if that first moment had built a doorway, and the second invited us through. No speeches, no declarations. Two people who already belonged to each other in 100 small ways, letting the truth have the courage to be seen. The memory stored itself with unusual clarity, the weight of a wrist resting light, a palm turning up like an open page, the delicate hush in the throat where a name sits when spoken softly, and beneath it a great, quiet yes unfurling. The body knows before the mouth admits. It learns the temperature of safety, the contour of welcome, the sound of a future warming its hands. Daylight came anyway, as it always does, rinsing the room with gold and pretending to be ordinary. But breakfast tasted different, brighter around the edges. The jokes from last night carried a new tenderness in their echo. A shoulder brushed past in the kitchen, and everything inside leaned toward that warmth without asking permission. There was no need to explain anything. The jars knew where their lids were. The coffee found its way into the mug. The heart remembered a new beat and kept it. Sometimes the world tries to demand grand gestures, fireworks, announcements thrown up into big skies. The truth here did not arrive like that. It walked in wearing familiar shoes and sat down at the same table, placed a hand where it had always belonged, and asked for nothing more than to be allowed. The size of it wasn't measured in volume, but in depth. It sank in and kept sinking, but not to drown, only to anchor. There was a walk that afternoon, the easy loop taken 100 times. Trees freckled the path with shifting light. A breeze hummed in leaves that had learned this music for centuries. Between steps, fingers brushed. Not a show, not a claim, just the lightest pressure, enough to say the room became a road, and the road kept the room's promise. No one looked around to see who was watching. The only witness needed was the steadying of breath shared between two bodies adjusting to the same weather at last. That evening, conversation found new pauses, not the kind made of hesitation, but the kind built for awe. A look held a beat longer and was met with steady certainty. The old shorthand we'd built together, half, smiles that translated entire paragraphs, didn't disappear, it deepened. Now those halves, miles held doorways behind them. Now a nod could mean meet me on the bridge between who we've been and who we're becoming. Love didn't erase friendship. It wrote the next chapter in the same careful hand. Later still, when the night turned glassy and thin, words finally came. They were few, they were simple, nothing about forever or fate, just the plain admission that something real had stepped into the room and sat down between us. A thumb traced a circle on the back of a hand, and the circle felt like a vow made without ceremony. Eyes closed not to escape, but to hold the feeling steady, to let it print itself where it would never blur. In the weeks that followed, life did not stop asking for patience. Work still called. Bills still arrived. Friends still needed rides to the airport. Yet everything moved with a secret cadence set in that first touch. Choices were made with more care. Fights, when they happened, broke cleaner and healed truer. The small kindnesses multiplied without keeping score. That's the way a first touch changes a life. It doesn't just ignite. It illuminates the edges of who we want to be for each other and makes that future legible. Sometimes, while washing dishes or crossing a street or waiting at a red light, that moment returns unbidden. A palm on a forearm, the hush, the widening, the way the world leaned in. Gratitude runs through the body like warm water. For all the minutes that built to it, for all the days after, for the courage that arrived disguised as instinct, what is remembered most clearly isn't fireworks or the crash of certainty. It's the softness, the care, the humility of two people admitting the truth gently enough that nothing fragile had to break. It looked like nothing from the outside. It felt like everything from within, and from that instant, the heart stopped reaching and began to rest. From that touch forever began. The room held a hush that felt earned, like quiet after a long storm. Lampshade light pooled warm on the floorboards, and the curtains breathed with the slow rhythm of the night wind. There were 2 cups on the table, rings left like time, stamps we never wiped away, a sweater slung over the back of the chair. that familiar playlist winding through the speakers as if it had been practicing for this moment. The world narrowed to small things, steam fading from a mug, the soft click of a clock, the steady rise and fall of breath, and all those small things pointed toward the one truth I had been circling for years. The walls I had built were not keeping danger out. They were keeping love from coming in. It didn't happen with a single grand gesture. It unfolded like a secret that had been waiting for the right ear. The first layer fell with a confession that didn't sound like a confession at all, only a sentence about the kind of day it had been, the kind that makes shoulders tight and eyes dry. A hand hovered and then settled over mine, simple as gravity. I felt the body's relief before the mind caught up. It is startling how much can be said without words, how much truth can be delivered through the warmth of skin and the steadiness of presence. For a second, I felt like a door left open by accident, and then realized maybe the door had been inviting this all along. The next layer was memory. All the years of ordinary devotion rose like lanterns, text messages that arrived in the hardest minutes, laughter that made worry dissolve, the way plans flexed so life could be easier, the way disappointment was met with soup and patience instead of impatience and judgment. There had been 100 small moments when loyalty showed up wearing comfortable clothes. The walls had watched it all and still stood. That night, they listened differently. They heard love's footsteps and decided to let them in. We talked about failures, the kind that still glow in the dark, and dreams we kept taped to the inside of quiet hearts. Words came slowly, but not because they were forced. They came slowly because the truth likes to be handled with care. Every sentence felt like placing a fragile cup on a table and trusting it wouldn't be knocked over. The soft light turned us both honest, and honesty turned the air gentle. I found myself offering stories never shared, not even in the safer daylight. In return, I received the kind of listening that makes the body exhale a lifetime of guarding. The walls didn't crash so much as they sank, tired from carrying what didn't need carrying anymore. There was a moment when the room shifted, the way a house sighs when the heat clicks on. We moved closer without thinking, a magnet, company that had finally decided to stop pretending it wasn't there. My head found a shoulder like it had always been meant to, and that shoulder didn't tense or flinch, it softened, welcomed, belonged. The heart tried to count all the reasons to be careful and ran out of numbers. The body learned a new truth, being held by someone who knows your ordinary is an extraordinary thing. Desire was there, sure, steady and alive, but it had a different face. It wasn't a rush toward forgetting. It was a drift into remembering the safety built over years, remembering the kindness that had shown up without asking for applause, remembering the way love had been practicing in quiet corners, waiting for permission. When lips found lips, it felt like coming home and starting a new life in the same breath. There was no part of me that wanted to be anywhere else. The kiss didn't announce itself with fireworks. It rewired the room with candlelight. It asked for patience and gave it back. The body warmed from the inside as if nerves were waking up slowly, each one raising its hands to say present. The night opened its palms. The world outside kept doing the world's noisy work, but the inside grew still and sacred. I felt the echo of every held, backward unwind in the heat between us. I tasted relief and recognition. I did not feel lost. I felt named. What surprised me most was the quiet in my head. Love had edge, walked along the borders of my life before, loud and urgent, confusing want with worth. This was different. This was the kind that knows the cost of staying and still stays. Fingers learned their way across familiar shoulders with new care, tracing not just a body but a biography. Every touch seemed to say, I remember the night you were hurt, sore and tried to hide it. I remember the morning you laughed until you cried. I remember the promise we never spoke but kept anyway. The walls didn't stand a chance against a love that catalogued tenderness like prayer. We paused often, not because of hesitation, but because awe demands it. There is a holiness in realizing the person across from you is the place you have been trying to arrive your whole life. The breath between kisses felt like a blessing. The whisper of a name sounded like a vow. I had thought passion would be the storm, but it was the shelter, the soft room where the body remembers it was made for kindness. The desire to be seen pulled even with the desire to be close, and both were met without rush. Nothing in me wanted to hide. Nothing in me wanted to hurry past the miracle of being fully welcomed. The past rose like a tide and then retreated, leaving only what mattered on the shore. All the times we'd chosen gentleness over cleverness, patience over performance, truth over winning, those choices became a foundation under our feet. The floorboards felt more solid. The night stretched long in the best way, refusing to let the moment collapse into cliché or fear. I had braced for regret and met gratitude instead. Even the parts of me that had learned to expect the worst sat down and rested their heads, finally quiet, finally fed. There was a point when we simply held each other and the holding did the talking. The rhythm of heartbeats braided into a single, steady thing. My body understood that healing can feel like heat and weight and breath in sync. Tears came, not from pain, not even from relief, but from the shock of finding peace in a place I had always thought would be dangerous. I pressed my face into the place that smelled like cedar and rain, and felt the years lift like the first light breaks off the horizon. I knew in my bones, love is not a thief when it has built the house it enters. Time tilted, maybe an hour passed, maybe it was 3. The clock was a small circle on the wall that had lost its power. A laugh sneaked in, a small, astonished laugh that understood joy had arrived quietly and meant to stay. We fed each other little truths between longer silences. We memorized breath. We let the present do what it had come to do, stitch the torn places closed with thread made of trust. The body, once so quick to brace, learned to lean and then to rest entirely. I did not know I could be this soft without breaking. I learned that softness is a strength that refuses to fight love. When sleep finally brushed our eyes, we didn't push it away. We let it layer itself over the room like a second quilt. Dawn came gentle and unassuming, a pale spill across the window, and everything looked both familiar and new. The cups, the sweater, the rings of tea gone faint. The world had not changed, but I had. The walls were gone. In their place stood windows, open to a sky that didn't ask for proof. I understood with the clarity only morning can bring that the night had not taken anything from me. It had given what fear never could, a home inside my own life. We made breakfast quietly, smiling the kind of smile that needs no translation. Every movement felt intentional, every small act a renewal of the vow we had made without ceremony. We touched like people who knew touching is a language, and we spoke it fluently. Love filled the house without crowding it. The day waited at the door like a friend, patient, unafraid, and I felt the truth settle in my chest, steady as breath, certain as light. From this night forward, nothing in me will ever choose the walls over the wonder again. Morning arrives like a secret we've both already heard, soft and sure, and the first thing felt is quiet peace, the kind that settles in the bones and decides to stay. The room is simple, rumpled sheets, a slice of sunlight pressed across the wall, the faint city hum that never quite sleeps. Breathing falls into sync without trying. There's a hand within reach, fingers splayed open as if they fell asleep holding a truth and forgot to close their palm. That hand is home. No one says it aloud. There's no reason to. The air holds the meaning just fine. No promises hang in the space between us. None of those grand declarations that need a witness or a stage. The vows, if they exist, live in ordinary rituals we've grown without naming. The kettle warming on cold mornings, the instinctive way a shoulder tilts so another can tuck in closer during a movie, that neither of us is really watching. The text that arrives at the exact minute, the day tips from manageable to too much, offering a single sentence that steadies everything. Friendship planted those seeds, love watered them in the dark, and now there's a field where a fear once stood. It still surprises me how something so gentle can be so complete. The gaze that lingers across a kitchen, the smile that rises before the eyes even look up, the small insistence of touch at the small of a back when a crowded room becomes too loud, all of it says what words would only complicate. Once, there might have been hunger for speeches, a need to define, to outline, to point and say, "This is who we are." Now, the definition is the living itself. What we are shows up as folded laundry, as a spoon resting in a shared bowl, as a late night walk just to feel the same night air. There are moments that prove devotion without ceremony. A door opens and care enters first. A mistake is met not with a ledger but with mercy. A plan falls apart and laughter answers the mess before frustration remembers its lines. The body recognizes what the mind sometimes forgets. Safety feels like warmth and weight, a head against a chest, a heartbeat steady as a metronome teaching a new song. The old walls don't even bother to rise anymore. They've learned there's nothing to guard against here. Every day there's a choice not to run, not because staying is the rule, but because leaving would be senseless. The world outside keeps busy with its schedules and winning, and the loud way it tries to prove things. In here, victory looks like the soft click of a lamp before dawn, and a second mug placed on the table without asking. It looks like the willingness to listen to a story told for the third time because the telling is part of healing. It looks like patience with moods, with weather, with silence. Love isn't a spotlight. It's the glow that takes over a room once eyes adjust. Sometimes memory rewinds to the early days, two friends orbiting the same jokes and parks and playlists, the not yet of it all humming in the background like a power line. Back then, forever felt like a word belonging to other people or to movies. It had too much echo, too much promise pressed into a small space. Now forever isn't a horizon. It's the next 5 minutes done well, and then the 5 after that. It's the choice to be gentle at the exact moment being right would be easier. It's the courage to say I don't know, and the trust that follows, we'll find out. There are imperfect days, of course there are. Feet find the wrong rhythm, nerves fray, old ghosts knock, yet even then the room holds. The kindness we've practiced doesn't evaporate. It leans in closer. Apologies come sooner. Forgiveness is not a performance but a reflex trained by time. The worst never has a chance to harden because hands reach first, and where hands reach, hard stories soften. It feels less like fighting and more like remembering, which is strange to say but true, remembering what matters, remembering who we are when we are good to each other. There is a look that passes between us in those moments, the one that says, still here. There is no pleading in it, no bargaining, just witness and commitment braided together without a knot. The eyes keep their calm even when the room doesn't. That calm changes the weather inside a body. Shoulders drop, breath evens. A thought that would have spiraled finds a place to land. In that look lies the simplest sentence we never speak. Nothing about this is provisional. Nights carry their own language. The world dims and touch takes over the conversation. The bed becomes a small country with its own laws. Tenderness first, honesty always, quiet welcomed. Faces rest close enough to make out the shape of each breath. The cadence of a name spoken low feels like both anchor and invitation. Desire is not urgency, but intimacy unfolding at the speed of trust. The hush is not empty. It's full of every yes we've said without grammar. Sleep doesn't feel like drifting away from each other so much as drifting into the same dream. There are future plans, of course there are, but even those feel different now. They aren't contingency maps or escape routes. their sketches made in pencil on a table sticky with syrup from breakfast. They can be rewritten without panic, updated without the brittle edge of control. The plan is simply this: keep choosing, keep tending, keep meeting the morning as if it's a gift that arrived with our names on it. If there's a surprise, let it be how easy it becomes to be kind. Small joys have grown a spine. The way sunlight hits the plant in the corner, the way keys sound in the lock, that tiny percussion announcing presence. The way two laughs can merge into one bout of pure silliness over nothing at all. Gratitude shows up unannounced and takes a seat, and somehow there's always room for it. Some days it feels like quiet worship, the reverent kind that doesn't need a congregation, just two believers in the miracle of the mundane. When friends ask what changed, there's no good answer that fits inside the words people expect. The truth is that everything changed and nothing did. The same faces, the same jokes, the same city streets, and yet beneath it all, an undercurrent so steady it could carry a boat. A sense that the story is not about chasing, the story is about arriving. Not at perfection, but at a life that wears our names comfortably. Even the hard histories don't frighten as they once did. Past versions of each of us show up sometimes, shy or defensive or tired, and are welcomed like relatives who stayed away too long. Love makes room, it doesn't erase, it integrates. The unlovely bits are not liabilities here. They are maps of where we've been, proof of miles traveled. The hands that hold those maps do so carefully, not to judge but to understand the terrain of today. Sometimes the apartment is quiet because we're reading or writing or just being. That quiet is not distance, it's trust given a body, knowing another heartbeat is in the room, close enough to reach without calling, is its own kind of music. The lamp hums, the floor creaks, an ankle brushes a calf under a blanket, and it's as if the earth nods. Outside, someone laughs loudly on the sidewalk, a siren flashes by, a bus sighs to a stop. Inside, the narrative holds a life shared, unshowy and luminous. There will be storms again, weather and otherwise. Roofs will need fixing, nerves will fray, time will make its relentless asks. The strange mercy is knowing those storms will not be faced alone or dramatically tamed by declarations shouted into thunder. They will be met the way everything is met here, with a steadying hand, with a look that remembers, with a patience learned through 1,000 small salvations. If there's a language for heaven on earth, maybe it sounds like that steadying, like devotion written in the spaces where noise used to live. And so mornings keep arriving, and nights keep making room, and the day between them threads itself with small, durable gold. No one has to stand up and proclaim a single thing. In the kitchen, a shoulder leans into another's back while coffee pours. On the couch, feet find their familiar tangle. In the doorway, a smile lifts just enough to say welcome home. It's not spectacle, it's sanctuary. Forever doesn't ask to be said, it asks to be lived. And that is exactly what's happening here. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep this space for hearts that believe in timeless love that doesn't need promises, just presence. Join the journey, feel the emotion, and be part of true love story with deep love.